So when it comes to market research, it's important then to understand what it is and how it works. There's two main areas of market research. There's what we call primary research, and this is the research that you do. You're going to go out there with your surveys, you're going to do the analysis of what comes back, you're going to interpret that analysis and make decisions that you then use. So you'll use the data you've come back with, or the decisions that came back with, or the interpretation that's come back with, and you apply that to your business. This is all completely end-to-end yours. You don't have to share it with anyone. It's just your research. I do a ton of this every year with Google Forms and different quizzes and different survey tools that I'll do my own market research to make sure that I'm still on the right track for some of the things I'm doing, particularly with some of the newer business ventures I'm going into, such as my reselling of mobile and NBN, or in some of the areas where I'm looking at doing startup support for small businesses. I had to do a bit of market research to see if there actually was a market for it. And if there was, why is there a market for it that isn't being fulfilled? And I worked out because there's no money in it. So I thought, so I got to find someone else to pay for it. And that led me to then go and seek a government program that will pay for that particular activity so that I can fulfill that gap and make some money for myself. So that primary research, when it's yours, it's got a lot of different, different advantages to it. And I'll look at some of those very shortly. Exploring the issues and when you're running your own means you're able to dig deeper into the things that you specifically need to know. So you can explore more than just yes and no answers. You can go a lot deeper into those. By digging deeper, you're finding more reasons for why people act the way they act, for more reasons for why people will want your particular product or service, or not want your particular product or service, as it may be. We can look at asking very specific questions. The problem is when we're using someone else's data is that they're asking the data that's to do with their particular business and the problems that they are looking to solve. They're not asking the questions about the problem you want to solve or the business you want to build. You might be able to relate them to that, but they're not exactly about you. And you do your own checks and balances. No one else is doing any of the checks and balances and the sanity checks to make sure that it was done correctly. It's all about you. Because it's all about you, it's 100% up to you to get it right. So that's the way you need to look at it. Secondary research, it's got to be someone else's work. So this is where someone else has done the research. They've already done it, interpreted the data, and quite often they've made it free to access either online or through other sort of government agency. And there's lots and lots of this data out there. You've got to consider there's more data collected in the last year than in the entirety of humankind. So you can imagine how much data there's going to be collected this year. So a lot of that data is available in public places like the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, a lot of the networks like those, they collect and then publish the data as well. So you can use that for your research purposes. So there's tons out there, and it's what other people have done, but it has its pros and cons as well. Yes, it's cheap and free, or it's quick to find. The work is already done. You do your own checks and balances, but it can take more time to dig through these things because you're not doing it yourself. It does take a little bit of effort when it comes to, if you're doing your own, for instance, it's going to take you a lot of effort. It's going to cost you more because you need to do the work and you need to buy the tools and you need to take the time out from your work. In this case, that's kind of the opposite of what I've got there. It takes you less time. It takes you less effort. It can cost you more if you're needing to pay for that. But in the case of all the tools we're going to look at today, you don't need to pay for them. They're all completely free and they won't take you away from your work, except for the time that you're going to take to be able to do that. So what methods are used for market research? What do we use out there to try and do these? And there's some really obvious ones that fulfill, most of the market research. Now, most of them, 79% of all of it is online surveys, and 79% of all the online research is done is by online surveys. You've probably seen them. I've seen them. They come up in Facebook. You see them all over the place. Emails, they're always in emails from places you've gone and shopped at. The 26% of all marketing research is essentially done online, even with the biggest companies. They're not doing a lot of really stuff that they're sitting down in closed labs and doing that kind of research. 26% of all of it is done by surveys done online. So that's really, encouraging for you, because that's a very cheap thing for you to be able to do. A quick bit of Facebook advertising in your local area, a link through, the promise of a $100 prize, and next thing you've got, hundreds, if not thousands of responses that are allowing you to work out whether a particular idea or some sort of question you want answered is easy to have answered. Surveys are very much the way to do this. They're simple to implement. They're simple to interpret, because you've asked the questions, you can understand the answers. They're what we call the quantitative. They're very much about numbers. And when you look at the aggregation of all that data that you're getting back from a survey, you're looking at, numbers. You're looking at pure numbers. Numbers don't lie. So if you make a multiple choice, or you make it yes or no answers, the numbers are going to be very, very strict and very, very accurate. Surveys also have a very high completion rate, particularly if they're short, sharp, and simple, and they don't have more than 1 or 2, maybe 3 questions at most. You'll get a very high completion rate. The problem with surveys is, though, that they can be very biased, because you've sent them out to a specific group of people that already know you, or they might have dealt with what it is you're trying to deal with as a business, or they're doing something that's going to be working with that, which can lead to what we call a skewed sample. It means that you've chosen a particular group of people. If you want to know what people between 33 and 54 are wanting out of their lives, and you've only sent it out to your friends, and all your friends are women, then you're only getting a skewed sample of women answering that. You're not getting necessarily the answer of all people, unless you were naturally looking for just women to complete that survey. And there's also a bit of a survey type. There's a kind of person that is a survey taker. They're usually someone who is a heavy user of social media. There's someone who is what we call a prize pig. So if you've got prizes attached to it, they're the kind of people who are likely to fill in surveys because there's a reward for them. They're the kind of people who have time and opinions. They've got a lot of opinions, and they really want those opinions to be heard. So those styles of personality that take part in these surveys cause that skewed sample, which makes the whole data that's coming back to you quite biased. So the idea of sending out a survey to people, you'd need to keep it simple, yes, but you want to make sure it goes out to a lot of different kinds of people. And that may mean that you need to ask a few more questions about the demographics. If you're getting 89% of the respondents are women between 35 and 45, then that's a very skewed sample. It's a very biased sample, and it's very much in that survey type of personality. Whereas you might really have wanted to know what a 24-year-old male thinks about this, but you're not going to get any of that, because they're not really in that survey type. They're not ones who have a high completion rate, and they're a little harder to reach than just posting something in Facebook or Instagram as a link. Shorter, much more specific and easy to complete surveys, they get a way better buy-in than all the other kinds of surveys, simply because they don't take much time and effort. Now, you're not going to get as much information from them, but you are at least going to get a completed survey. And it shows that about 76% of people will complete a survey if it has 3 or less questions that are just simply multiple choice and don't require any sort of qualitative responses. And by qualitative, I mean things where people express their opinion in their own words, rather than selecting a multiple choice or selecting a scale of 1 to 10. So if you're doing that sort of thing where you want more opinions, you want more people's personal responses, you're far less likely to get people to complete your survey if you do have those kind of fields in there. So I'd say when you're first getting started on conducting your own market research, it might be a good idea to leave those qualitative questions out and just concentrate on the things that can be answered as true or false, yes or no, on a scale of 1 to 10, or in a pull down of predetermined answers. You want that multiple choice kind of feel, simply because it makes it more likely that people will actually complete that survey. Now, we've found that even though there's some theories that say, oh, if you make something gameable, if you make it sort of winnable, if you make it prize winnable, that it'll get lots more people in, it actually doesn't. What it does do is get a lot more of the kind of people in who are that typical survey type of person, the prize pig, the person who wants to win all the prizes and wants to be rewarded for everything they do. And they're a very particular personality type that may not reflect the demographic you're trying to reach with your product. So gamifying surveys actually is showing that it doesn't actually lead to any more responses. It just leads to more responses from a particular subsection. But sometimes that gamification can make someone take it not seriously, and they won't answer the truth. They'll just answer what's the quickest thing to answer in there rather than what they actually think. So if you're thinking about adding prizes, incentives, that sort of thing, you actually don't need to, because by and large, you'll get a far larger sample of people by not doing that than if you add in things like games and spinning wheels and prizes. Now, there's another area that you can look into is case studies, and these are quite complex. They give you lots and lots of in-depth feedback about the subject you're trying to ask about. So you get way better data. You get lots and lots of opinions, feelings, thoughts, emotional responses, reactions than what you do in a survey. But case studies are held in a slow way. They're often you interviewing one person. So they're a small sample, and it does take lots of time. You can't base it upon like your whole product decision or your whole release of your business based upon the opinion of one person. That committee of one is a big danger. Even a committee of 10 is a big danger. You'd need to get a really good variety of people. We're talking about 50 different interviews you would take for a case study to get that kind of feedback and data. This is quite good for things like designing a website, particularly for the service where people are going to have to pay something at the end. You want to make sure they get all the way through the end, and you address all the hurdles, all the speed humps that are going to get people there to that thing you actually want them to do on your website. So having that sort of case study where you've got lots and lots of in-depth looking at people working and clicking through websites or trying to use your product or trying to understand your service, you're going to have time, and you're going to have a lot of time to do it right, because it's going to involve a lot of different interviews. And there's also, just like there's a survey type, there's a case study type, there's an interview type. People who have the time to participate in this sort of thing tend to be of demographics that they have, either government jobs where they can take time out for these kinds of things, or they're unemployed and have all the time in the world to be able to respond to these things. There may be some exceptions in there, here and there, but even so, if someone was going to take an hour and a half or 2 hours out of their day to participate in a case study, there's got to be something in it for them. So there's it's going to skew your sample a bit, because you're going to find that kind of person may not be the kind of person who is actually interested in buying your product. Now, they're often done in an interview style or in some kind of closed lab setting, so that they're not distracted by anything. There's nothing around them. It's just you and they, and you're talking about a set of questions that are usually the same as what you're going to ask to all the other participants as well. But you will get a lot of those qualitative responses. So opinions, thoughts, feelings, and emotional reactions, rather than just simply yes, no, or multiple choice answers. Now we look at focus groups, which are very similar to the case study. They're as well very complex, and you get lots and lots of in-depth feedback, but it's from multiple participants rather than just the one. A focus group is a lot quicker to get through than case studies, because you can put 50 people in a room and do a focus group rather than interviewing 50 individual peoples. It can be tainted by the participants. Now, in any group setting, you get that sort of group dynamic where the one or two alpha kind of people are sort of trying to drive the agenda, and they've got their opinions and they want to be known for it. Kind of like in a jury duty kind of situation, there's always one person who seems to be the driving alpha person. And then there's other people who just, it can be tainted that alpha person kind of leads the opinion. They become a bit of a thought leader, and others will just follow what their opinion is, regardless of whether that is helping you get the outcome you want to get. So these can be, if you've ever, taught a class of people or done a class with a live seminar with people, there's one or two people who will drive the agenda, the questioning, and the information, and they will be overserved themselves, often to the detriment of everybody else who's there. It can take less time though, so it's a much more efficient way of getting that information you might want, but it will be slow. It will be slower than just running a survey, for instance. But the information you're going to get is still going to be a lot more powerful. You're just going to make sure that sometimes, and a lot of the professional research agencies, they ensure that the wild opinions and the very outlying kind of opinions that come up in focus groups tend to be cut off, and they're just looking for what the average is, what the average opinion is within a range, rather than what the extreme opinions by one particular alpha kind of person in the group may happen to be. They're done in a group setting, usually in person, but they can be done online through things like Zoom. So you can do that kind of thing in a setting where it might be, 5 or 6 of you around a table, in a cafe, in a closed area. Better in a closed area because there's less distractions. So you actually then book out a room and do it. And even to the point of maybe catering it. If you cater for people who are there for 2 hours, they can stay very focused, and they will feel better towards you, the product, and what they're talking about. But it's best for these people that they do not know what they're talking about before they go into the setting. You tell them it's all about your coaching business, then unfortunately they'll have preconceived ideas they'll walk into that with, and they'll be editing themselves rather than giving honest feedback as they're going through that interview style and that round table, round robin style of interview.